We need to make sure that our salespeople that we choose are really able to ask questions, listen carefully to the responses given, ask follow-up questions and be curious, and facilitate that two-way dialogue because it's so important to buyers that there be a true conversation that bring their needs to the forefront.
Welcome to episode 5 of Top Down. I'm Josh Mastel, your host and the CEO of Uproar Partners. We help business owners and startups go to market by owning the sales process and driving growth. We drive growth for business owners and startups by owning the sales process and go-to-market execution. Today, we're talking with Deb Calvert, the president of People First Productivity Solutions. She's also the co-author of Stop Selling and Start Leading: How to Make Extraordinary Sales Happen. Deb is a certified master of sales coach and a master trainer. She's a charter member of the Salesforce Advisory Board and a graduate of the Accelerating Salesforce Performance Execution Program out of Northwestern University. Deb is also a member of the American Society for Training and Development, National and Mount Diablo chapters, the American Management Association, the SF Coaches, the chapter of the International Coach Federation. There is nothing this girl does not do. She's a certified practitioner in the Myers Briggs type indicator and other assessment tools. She's one of the best sales leader trainers. She's one of the best sales leadership trainers in the world today. I'm so thrilled to have her on the show to share some actionable wisdom with you. Well, hey, Deb, welcome again. Thanks for hopping on the Top Down podcast. The listeners would have just gotten a really good summary of what you're doing and your background, which is really impressive. Why don't you give us maybe the 1 or 2 minute summary of what's keeping you busy currently in your career right now?
I'm extremely busy right now with being on the circuit, talking about the new book, Stop Selling and Start Leading. I co-authored that with Jim Kouzes and Barry Posner. They are giants in the leadership space. And we did some research with buyers that everybody seems to want to know about. So I'm traveling quite a bit, talking to conferences and clients about this research. It's all-consuming.
It's really cool. That's really cool. I'm excited to hear a little bit more about that. It sounds like there's a whole book full of content on this, so it's going to be hard to narrow it down to, I guess, a similar conversation for us. But let's dig into some of that research that you guys have been doing. What are some of the more interesting points in that we could take off with?
Well, here was our premise. We thought that it might be interesting to explore what would happen if sellers adopted the behaviors that are proven for leaders to cause others to want to follow them, to more willingly choose to follow them. That was my theory. I took that to Jim and Barry because their work is seminal. They know the 30 behaviors, and they've been, for the last 30 years, proving that over and over again around the world, 30 behaviors that cause leaders to have stronger followership. So that's what we took to buyers. We asked them, for each of those 30 behaviors, would you be more likely to buy from? Would you be more likely to meet with sellers who demonstrated these behaviors more frequently? And all 30 behaviors with all buyers, all B2B buyers that we talked to in this study that was conducted, 530 emphatically said, yes, we would like to see much more frequency in these behaviors than we currently do from the sellers who call on us. So the quick takeaway is these are behaviors that most sellers and business owners and startups would not identify readily that, oh yeah, that's what my sellers should be doing.
Wow. Give us some of those. I'm imagining of the 30, there's, like you said, there's got to be some unique ones that we're not thinking of. What are some of the more interesting ones that kind of struck you as odd or from right field?
Okay, well, we grouped the 30 behaviors into 5 practices. That makes it a little bit easier. So I'll talk about one of the 5 practices, because even going into this research, I thought this would be lower than it was for buyers. But the 6 behaviors under a practice called Enable Others to Act, way on top. This is out of all of the things the buyers want. These behaviors are way up there. They really want us to enable them to act. And that includes things like answering their questions in a relevant and timely manner, even the price question. It includes conducting a two-way dialogue. So instead of it being one way, usually we go in there, we're trying to qualify the buyer, we ask questions. It feels to them more like a survey. They don't want that. They want a two-way dialogue where they get to participate in creating what they want. They want to have a voice. They want to have their opportunity to put their own imprint on the solution. And the more we can engage them, the more they feel enabled and they're buying in before we ever ask them to buy.
Did you do any research around the effects that technology is having on the buying process? Did that play a part in this?
That was not our specific research, but the leadership behaviors that we did research, certainly that they will pertain to everything that is technology-based, phone-based, old school email, face-to-face. It doesn't matter how we're engaging with our buyers. If anything, we did get some comments where buyers felt like sellers were not human to human with them because technology was a barrier.
Yeah, I keep hearing that over and over again. You're so right. And the more salespeople I talk to, I feel like the biggest area I'm always trying to remind them of, especially younger salespeople, is don't forget that this is just another human being on the other side of this call or meeting that makes decisions just like you and I do. And I think people get, when they're in a sales call, they kind of put their sales hat on as opposed to their human hat.
Absolutely. Well said.
And I guess to clarify a bit more about what I mean by technology is I feel like these days, any time I'm purchasing something, whether that's as a business or as a consumer, I've done 90% of my research before I even talk to a salesperson. Now, I still want to talk to a salesperson, but I feel like now more than ever, my decision is already close to the finish line. Did you see any of that in your research, or did you guys talk on that topic?
Yeah, so this is part of where buyers want to be enabled. They want their ideas that they already have to be dignified, and they want sellers to align with them where they already are. However, buyers often don't know what they don't know. They've done all that research. They think that it's now down to the final decision, and they commoditize products because they think they look alike based on the research they've done, which is why they always want to talk about price.
Yep.
But what a seller who's going to make an extraordinary sale will do is use that two-way dialogue to open the conversation back up and to shine a light on what the buyer didn't even know that they didn't know, and to engage them without taking away from the work they've already done, without dismissing where they're already heading and thinking, but coming alongside that to open up the pieces the buyer hasn't seen yet.
I love that. And to validate your own research, I literally, on Thursday of last week, I'm making a big investment in HubSpot right now to build out my sales organization. And I've done all my research. I know what the tool can do. I know that it can grow with me. I literally got on a call with a sales rep for one reason before I pulled the trigger with them. I said, sales rep, I already know that I want your product, but please right now tell me what I don't know that I don't know about the product to push me across the finish line. I literally said those exact words on Thursday of last week.
Fantastic. We did research on the seller side too. And we found out that sellers, when they make extraordinary sales, because we asked them, we didn't tell them about leadership stuff. We just said, hey, tell us the story of your personal best in selling. And then we looked to see if leadership behaviors showed up. And you're right. Sellers who do that, who listen to buyers carefully and then give them the missing ingredients, those are the ones who stand out.
Love that. Love that. So let's change gears now too. I know with all this research that you've done, this is super interesting about, what the modern buyer today is motivated to purchase upon. Our listeners are, tech startup founders that are just starting to get into the sales world and figure out how to get their product or service out there. Or they're small business owners who have typically been on the treadmill their whole lives, being the ones selling for their business, and they want to start scaling via a team. So I'm sure all this research now rolls over into, as a leader, how are you managing a team of salespeople to put the principles that you've researched into play? Did you guys talk about that, or where's your stance on that of how we can be effective leaders with all this in mind?
Well, let's see. First of all, to manage a team of leaders who are selling, because this is about stepping into these leadership behaviors, I think first and foremost, the person managing the sellers, whether that's the business owner or you've got somebody who is doing that for you, you also will now need to be a leader, not just a manager, but a leader who inspires others and challenges and encourages others and models what you want to see from them. So it does raise the bar, as it should, because buyers have raised the bar for sellers. So that's first and foremost, thinking of yourself too as a leader, not just a manager. You manage work, you lead people. That's the short version of the difference. And then what do you look for in your sellers? I think that's the next piece, because if buyers are looking for something different and you're just now hiring sellers or building up your sales team, you might as well go out and find the ones that are going to be able to interact with buyers the way buyers want them to. So you're looking for people who have an ability to inspire, not with blue sky, paint a picture and manipulate you into believing something that isn't true, but really inspiring about the things that are real. You probably want someone with great critical thinking skills because buyers do want to have that two-way dialogue. You have to be nimble for that. Critical thinking because buyers want you to innovate with them and they want you to challenge yourself and challenge processes so that there's something, because they're wondering what's new, what's next. So I'd be looking for critical thinking. Oh, and this, one of the most important things to buyers is that we simply follow through on our promises and commitments. I call that DWSYWD because the acronym is DWYSYWD. DWSYWD. That's just do what you say you will do. It's so simple, right? Do what you say you will do. But so many sellers don't. So how about as you're reviewing your candidates, you give them something to do, a time to call you or some other couple of things that you're going to check out, and just make sure that they absolutely do follow through on those promises and commitments.
That is some golden stuff for interviewing right there. I think a lot of my customers, I think their biggest fear when they're scaling a team is they've made so many bad hires in the past and they've been burned. You know, I think there's a whole different conversation of why they've been burned with their sales team not working. But hiring the wrong person is such a fear in people's minds that it cripples them sometimes. And I think that a lot of that advice you just gave is really great.
Well, you're right. And what's happening when wrong hires are being made, even by seasoned sales managers, it's that there's a stereotype of the seller persona, somebody who's extroverted and high energy and rah motivated. And that person may or may not have what it takes to be a salesperson.
Mm-hmm.
We can all turn that on if we really want to in an interview, but there's going to have to be more. We need to make sure that our salespeople that we choose are really able to ask questions, listen carefully to the responses given, ask follow-up questions and be curious, and facilitate that two-way dialogue because it's so important to buyers that there be a true conversation that bring their needs to the forefront.
You dropped a little gold nugget earlier that I have to go back to. You mentioned the difference between leadership and management is you lead people and you manage work. Can you dig into that further? I know you probably have a ton of really, really good knowledge behind that, and I think that needs to get shared.
Okay, well, manage. You go to school, you can get an MBA. There's plenty of formula around how to manage. It's a science. And managing work, the word manage comes from the root word of mano, which is hand in Spanish, because it means to handle the work. Manage means handling the work, often through other people. By its very nature, it has a short-term focus on getting the job done today. Leader, on the other hand, is something different. The word leader comes from Latin, Middle French, and that is to guide. Leaders guide people, and if you're going to guide someone, that suggests you're taking them to a place they've never been before. Otherwise, they wouldn't need a guide. So if you get to the visual of yourself going through the jungle with a machete, you're clearing the path. You're out there in front, and you're taking people to this place they want to go. They're choosing to go with you because they trust you and will follow you there. And that's you've got to do both. If you are in a management role, ideally you will be both a leader and a manager.
I know you travel in the country, seeing quite a bit of different organizations, different setups, different management styles. Where do you think are some of the biggest flaws today in the ways that leaders or sales managers specifically are managing their people or leading their people?
Sales managers have one of the toughest jobs out there, and that's because they take on themselves a lot more than is truly their role. So they end up in any given day, a sales manager is probably doing a lot of recruiting and interviewing because they don't have an HR person that they'll entrust that work to. They're out selling because they got to make the number today. They're running interference internally with finance and credit and production to get everything just right. And they are doing all kinds of mountains of paperwork and reports and dashboards to try to get the forecast just right and know where things are going to end up. What they're not doing, the biggest mistake, what they're not doing is spending time with their sellers, observing them and coaching them, developing them to help them become stronger in their own right so that the sales manager doesn't have to do that selling work. And it becomes a vicious circle. Right? The more the sales manager does the frontline work, the less the sellers are capable of doing it.
Yep. So what's your advice then? If that sales manager, that leader's got all those things on their plate, how do they get out of it? Are they at the wrong company that's not supporting them enough? Or is there a way that they could get out of that cycle?
Yeah, 9 times out of 10. So I'm talking about larger companies now. 9 times out of 10, it's that there are people. It's just that the sales managers have always been rewarded for and expected to do things on their own. So they don't know how to delegate and trust others and collaborate to, say, teach the HR person what it looks like to select the right candidates in sales. And then that work is off your plate. Sure, you're going to be a part of the interview, but let the person in HR be fully enabled to do all the rest of that work. And then the other part of the question is, what if there aren't the right resources? Well, I think you have to start showing the downside, right? The downside is, and it's always there, we're not making numbers, or we're making numbers at the very last minute. We're never going to get ahead this way. And there's some serious ROI and lost opportunity costs that come with that. You got to run the numbers and make the business case for being able to staff up appropriately.
Now, I'm really passionate on this topic that I'm seeing in the world out there, especially the sales world and the management and leadership world. You know, I was raised by a military dad. I was raised with some grit. I'm kind of an old school guy, and I've noticed quite a bit of softness out there in terms of how we're leading people, how we're managing people, the expectations that we have of people. Do you see the same thing, or am I crazy?
You're absolutely right, and I can speak right where you are because, in fact, both my parents were Marine Corps drill sergeants.
Okay.
So I know a little thing or two about discipline and grit.
Yep, I love it.
Yeah.
What do you think is what's the reason and what's the fix? Like, what's going on out there and why?
Different things in different places. In some industries, it's pretty tough to recruit, or in some markets even, it's pretty tough to recruit. So people are afraid of their sales team leaving. That vacant chair scares them more than underperformance. So they cater to salespeople and they barely hold them up to quota standards. Softness also comes when you misunderstand what people are really looking for. See, all of us, not just salespeople, we know this from Gallup research about reasons people leave. The top 4 reasons have nothing to do with pay. They all have to do with a manager giving them candid feedback, helping them to improve, being able to see a pathway to success. That's what people really want. But managers, if they've never been trained, especially, they think that what people want is a soft answer instead of the hard truth. So we're protecting people from the truth, which means they aren't improving, and they eventually go somewhere else because they begin to feel like this is not a place where they're going to have a chance to grow.
Totally. So I think it's actually that it's not the salespeople that are getting soft. It's the way that we're managing and leading those people that has gotten soft, which is creating this, big void.
Agreed.
I managed a team for about 7-8 years, pretty large sales team. And I was always really big. My mentors always taught me from early on how important expectations were in the, sales management process of managing and leading your people. What are you seeing out there in terms of teams' abilities to set crystal clear expectations for the salespeople working for them?
Yeah, most sales managers are not great at this. They don't have training many times, but the other thing that works against them is that they think the goal, the quota, the number is the expectation, and they leave it at that. So then if they have activity standards, they sort of put those on the back burner unless the number's not being made. And then it feels like an ambush to the salesperson when suddenly the activity standards get taken out. And
totally.
They don't have expectations around how, right? There's the right results, but you should also be getting them the right way. So that's a culture piece in terms of your expectation about how we do things here.
Yep. So coming back to your book, what advice would you have for some of these business owners, leaders, sales managers that, if they were to grab your book and read all the, the 30 principles in there on this topic, how could they infuse that into the new expectations that they need to set for their team to help them with their success?
Well, we've made it easy. So we have broken this into the 5 practices And each of the 5 practices has 2 commitments that need to be made. And we've, at the end of each chapter where those commitments are, so in 10 chapters, there are 5 or 6 action items. Do these things, and
Nice.
you'll have the blueprint, the behavioral blueprint for your sellers that buyers want.
That's awesome. That's great. You mentioned training a minute ago as well, and I know you're traveling around as part of your business. You do a lot of training work, and I'm sure you're including these principles in there as well. How much are you seeing out in the world right now of the responsibility on the leader to do the training, and do you think it's effective? That's the first part of the question. The second part is, do you encourage companies, or should most companies be bringing in folks like yourself or other sales trainers to help them on that journey?
This is going to sound like an answer that's self-serving, but I will say I used to be a corporate director in a Fortune 500. Before that, I worked in a market where I have done training directly inside my own organization. So I'm going to make the choice twofold. If it's going to be by the sales manager or somebody inside your organization, get that person trained as an instructional designer in adult learning principles so they can do true knowledge transfer. These are separate skills. They're separate from everything else in management. They're not presentation skills. If you don't want to do that because it's time consuming and not everybody might be wired for it, then go ahead and bring in an outside resource, someone who will align with your organizational goals, not just something off the shelf, but someone who is well-versed in how to train and coach and impart knowledge in a way that people can take it and apply it immediately.
Yeah, that's great. I come from an industry that hired a lot of young people right out of school, and for having that methodology of hiring, it's crazy to me how the entire industry was really, really poor at training. Now, I'm seeing that people learn a lot. I know for myself, I learn a lot differently now than I used to. Anything I want to learn, I go on YouTube and I can learn something really quickly through video, through audio. How is that impacting the way that you're seeing training done? Are we stuck back in the 70s, or are people starting to finally adapt?
I do think there's some adaptation. It's going to depend again on the needs of your team. Whether it's a workshop, a webinar, a series of videos, self-paced, there are options, but it's not a blanket statement that you can make. You said the right thing there, Josh. You said that you said the word I go onto YouTube. Well, that's not how everybody learns. Some
Sure.
people still want to learn in an interactive environment. And to be able to include all the preferences of adults in a learning situation with different modalities, that's the ideal that you want from a training partner.
You mentioned the military earlier, that we have that same kind of upbringing, and I love this topic. And I have a gentleman that's been in the military for a long time coming on the show here in a few weeks. So I'm excited to hear his take on this too. But why do you think that the military has leadership nailed down so well? And secondly, what do you think your parents did so well in raising you with their military background that helped teach you a lot of the principles that you live by today?
I'm sure the military does a lot of things well, but here's one thing that I think is quite impressive. The military requires commanding officers to have a leadership philosophy. In fact, in the Army, there is a semester-long course that you take on developing your philosophy of leadership. So that forces commanding officers to think of themselves as leaders, to know what their values are, their principles, what they stand for, and what their actions are going to look like to reflect those values. And the reason the military does this is because people have to know what they stand for. If you're going to ask someone to follow you into battle and put their life and limb at risk, then they better know what you stand for.
Sure.
Leadership philosophy is an exercise that any leader can do. And it's powerful when I take leaders through that and they sort of transform through that process. So I think that's one good practice that comes from the military. My parents, oh boy, they taught me so many things. I'll just tell you this piece. My mom was one of the first U.S. women Marines to be sent overseas and one of the first to be in a recruiting role to bring in other women Marines. And as a recruiter, she learned to sell. So when I was a kid, because I was so talkative and outgoing, she thought I would be good at selling. I became a campfire girl. We had an annual candy drive, and my mom taught me how to sell because I was so motivated. I wanted to sell enough candy to get to go to Camp Shawnee every year. And she'd normally coach me, and I'd get like 2 or 3 free weeks on scholarship from all the candy I sold. So
That's great.
Yeah, and it became my career. So I
I love that. That's really, really cool. So speaking of, young people and putting that seed in them at a young age, I'm really, really passionate about young people, especially, the college age. I feel like there's so much confusion out there at that age that you're supposed to have figured out what you're going to do in your life. At age 20, you're supposed to know what you're passionate about already. And it just creates a lot of confusion. What advice do you have for that generation, that younger generation, as they're entering their career, as they're entering, a lot of people that even want to get into sales as a career? What advice do you have for them?
Be flexible. The world is changing so fast. So instead of deciding on a job or a title, think about the skills, your natural abilities. If you are really good and you enjoy public speaking, think about all the options that you have and keep an open mind to pursuing that passion using that skill. If you've come up through, debate or forensics, then you've got some critical thinking skills, and that's going to be one of the master skills of the near future. So leverage your skills, know yourself well enough, and don't limit yourself to a job title that seems attractive.
Man, that is awesome. I really appreciate that. That's the golden stuff right there. Well, Deb, this has been really, really awesome. Stop selling and start leading. I'm going to get my copy here today. I'm excited to dig in and read that. Why don't you give our listeners as much information as possible about where they can find you and how they can be following you?
Okay, do find me and follow me because I love to have follow-up conversations. I'm Deb Calvert, and when you look for me on LinkedIn, that's how you'll find me. If you're looking for me on Twitter or on Skype or anywhere like that, you'll find me at my handle, which is the company name, People First PS. People and First are spelled out. PS stands for Productivity Solutions. That's also the website, peoplefirstps.com. And if you want to reach out to me, go ahead and email me, deb.calvert@peoplefirstps.com. I enjoy the conversations. I'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Deb.
Thank you, Josh.
All right, just to recap a few things. Number 1, be honest and be direct with your customers and your salespeople that you lead. Being soft, beating around the bush doesn't do anyone any favors. Number 2, instructional training is a different skill than most leaders already have. Natural leaders probably need to have some kind of guidance or training to help them through that. And number 3, this is a timeless classic that's important to review. The difference between leadership and management is that you lead people and you manage work. You can check Deb out at peoplefirstps.com. That's peoplefirstps.com. Please share this podcast and visit us at uproarpartners.com to find out more sales growth wisdom. And feel free, if you have any questions, send me an email at letshunt@uproarpartners.com. That's LETSHUNT@uproarpartners.com. And remember, everyone wants to eat until it's time to hunt. Have a great day.